Bueno, después de escuchar este homenaje tan bonito a Vargas Llosa, vamos a entrar a su universo más inquietante, creo yo, que es Conversación en la Catedral, que de hecho es una de mis novelas favoritas. Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Javier, Sonia y a todo el equipo del Open de Arbitraje por invitarme aquí a mi tierra a conducir este panel que me ilusiona un montón, porque el tema que vamos a escuchar es sumamente relevante y controversial últimamente. Los organizadores, me han pedido, nos han pedido que este panel sea conducido y realizado en inglés, así que vamos a hacer el cambio de inmediato y voy a hablarles un poquito de qué va Conversación en la Catedral, por si no la han leído. Y si no lo han hecho, de verdad que les animo a hacerlo. Conversación en la Catedral, o Conversation in the Cathedral, is one of Mario Vargas Llosa's most ambitious and complex novels. Set in 1950s Peru, during the dictatorship of Manuel Odría, it explores how corruption, fear, and moral decay infiltrate every layer of society. The story unfolds through a long, fragmented conversation between Santiago Zavala, a disillusioned journalist from an upper-class family, and Ambrosio, his father's former chauffeur. They meet by chance in a shabby Lima bar called La Catedral, and over the course of several hours, their dialogue becomes a kind of excavation of Peru's collective memory. Through shifting timelines and multiple perspectives, Vargas Llosa reveals a society trapped in complicity and silence. The novel moves between the personal and the political. Santiago's alienation mirrors a nation's loss of ideals, while Ambrosio's secrets expose how private corruption sustains public power. The well-known opening question, at what precise moment did Peru screw itself up? ¿En qué momento se había jodido el Perú? Introduces the book's focus. Rather than seeking a definitive answer, it examines the ways in which truth can become unclear, how power can influence narratives, and how people attempt to maintain integrity within a complex system. Vamos a escuchar a Vargas Llosa.
Les habla Mario Vargas Llosa. Voy a leer el comienzo de mi novela Conversación en la Catedral. Desde la puerta de la crónica, Santiago mira la avenida Tacna sin amor. Automóviles, edificios desiguales y descoloridos, esqueletos de avisos luminosos flotando en la neblina, el mediodía gris. ¿En qué momento se había jodido el Perú? Los canillitas merodean entre los vehículos detenidos por el semáforo de Wilson, voceando los diarios de la tarde, y él echa a andar despacio hacia la colmena. Las manos en los bolsillos, cabizbajo, va escoltado por transeúntes que avanzan también hacia la Plaza San Martín. Él era como el Perú Zabalita, se había jodido en algún momento. Piensa, ¿en cuál?
We'll talk about Zabalita and his moral dilemmas with our guests, whom I will now introduce. Ernesto Benito is a lawyer from la Universidad Complutense de Madrid. For many years, he headed the Litigation and Arbitration Department of Pricewaterhouse in Spain. In 2020, he founded his own firm, RRBS Legal, specializing in litigation and arbitration. He has been a professor of arbitration at IE, Instituto Empresa, and now in Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. His experience both as a state attorney and later as counsel and arbitrator in private practice has developed in public procurement, construction, infrastructure, M&A, and in different regulated sectors like telecom, among others. He acts as arbitrator at the ICC and Spain's main arbitration centers. He's also an expert in sports law, currently serving as Secretary General and head of the legal department of the Royal Spanish Golf Federation. Ernesto, which literary character, whoever, from any author, would you invite to El Bar La Catedral?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Cecilia, thank you very much, Javier, Alfredo, and all for inviting me to participate in this, in such a panel. Well, since we are in the cathedral, I will have sure that beer with Zabalita, so we can catch up about the social and political situation in this wonderful country that is El Peru.
Let's see what Diana says about that question, but first I'm going to introduce her. Diana is a professor of arbitration and international law at Università Externado de Colombia and an independent arbitrator. Diana holds an NLM in responsibility law and damages from the Externado and 3 more postgraduate degrees at the Universidad Panteón Assas Paris II. An LLM in private international law, a master's degree in international economic law, and a doctorate PhD in public international law. She has participated in more than 70 national and international arbitrations. Diana is listed in several regional arbitration centers, and since last year, she belongs to the ICSID and the ICDR lists of arbitrators. Which literary character would you choose, Diana?
Yeah, same question. Thank you, Ceci, and thanks, gracias. I have to say it in my own language, but thank you for inviting me. Gracias por invitarme a este lindo evento. Y saben ustedes, lo repito siempre, I have to say it again, I love being here in Peru. It feels like home for me. So I would invite Clarissa Dalloway.
Sorry, who?
Clarissa Dalloway, from Mrs. Dalloway. It's a book of Virginia Woolf. And for many reasons, the very personal ones, I was living in Cambridge when I discovered that book, Cambridge, UK, which is very cold, rainy, and gray. And I was kind of depressed because of the weather. And I felt into this book, and I love it because then it became my companion by that time. And it was so well written, and that story of that single woman in that single day, and she sees her life all happening the same day and reflects on her choices, her relationships, everything. And that makes me think also on my own journey as a person, as an arbitrator, and particularly to all the things we are going to speak today. So definitely, I would go with Clarissa.
Good character. Andrea. Andrea Horta is the founding partner at Horta González Cecilia Abogados. She's the coordinator of the Arbitration Commission of the Mexican Bar Association. She's member of the Award Scrutiny Commission of CIAM-CIAR. She has been director of the Mediation and Arbitration Commission of the National Chamber of Commerce in Mexico City, Canaco. She has been recognized in Band 1 in the category of most in-demand arbitrators by Chambers and Partners in its guide for Latin American Global Guide. She has experience in national and international arbitrations as counsel, an arbitrator in ad hoc and institutional arbitration procedures under several rules. Your character, Andrea.
Well, first I want to thank Javier and Sonia for inviting me in this great event. And I will choose a recent character that I know. It's Circe from the book with the same name, Circe, because it's a woman. She empowered herself despite her personal context, surrounded by mythological great creatures. So I like that story.
Nice. And Catherine Rogers. Catherine is a law professor at Bocconi University in Milan, in Italy, and an affiliated research professor at University of California Law at San Francisco. Her specialization in ethics in international arbitration and is working on a second edition of her book by the same title. She has been a recurring visitor at Peruvian international arbitration events after reconnecting with Huáscar Escurra, her colleague from when they were both LLM students at Yale. Catherine wrote an excellent paper, which I truly recommend to you to read, published in 2023 by Harvard International Law Journal. Its title is Reconceptualizing the Party-Appointed Arbitrator and the Meaning of Impartiality, addressing the topics that, of course, we will discuss this morning with you. Your character.
So I don't know if this is cheating or not, but I think instead of a character, I will choose a narrator. So you have different kinds of narrators, the character narrator, but there's also this omnipotent sort of narrator who sees everything but is not involved in the activities. And I think that is kind of, maybe I'm not omnipotent, but what I do, I don't sit as an arbitrator. I occasionally serve as an expert witness, but I try to observe and describe. So I'm very much working hard on the second edition of my book, and I try to observe what is happening, what the other characters are doing, and describe it, accurately and in a context that makes sense. So I think of myself maybe more as a narrator than a character.
Makes sense. Well, the central theme of this panel is the silent dilemma of the party-appointed arbitrator. Is impartiality a reality or is fiction? En conversación en la Catedral, Santiago Zavala o Zabalita faces a profound dilemma. I don't know if you read the book, but if yes, you will recall it. He struggles all the time to remain outside the political and economic system that he fiercely rejects, but its marks are deeply engraved in his soul. In Vargas Llosa world, regardless of will or appearance, the characters are trapped by their own circumstances. In a similar way, a party-appointed arbitrator faces a dilemma, deep and silent. Can one truly act with impartiality when chosen by a party who made the appointment? Conversación en la Catedral reminds us that pressure is not always explicit. Sometimes it operates as an unspoken duty. So let's start with the first round that we have decided to call the silent dilemma. We will address this silent dilemma, the inner tension of the party-appointed arbitrator, and Andrea is going to help us answering the question if can an arbitrator truly detach from the fact of being appointed by one of the parties?
Thank you, Cecilia. This is a very complex topic, and we all are aware that the rule is that arbitrators must be impartial and independent. Even the party-appointed arbitrators, and I love the word in Spanish, who is co-arbitrator, that is not party-appointed arbitrator, okay? And the explanation for General Standard 5 in the IBA guidelines says we don't distinguish between sole arbitrator, chairman or chairwoman, and party-appointed arbitrator. So I think the question here is whether in reality we can achieve this, and if yes, how can we do it? And it's not a simple question. I think we have to do several nuances to be considered. First of all, this is a human activity. So the answer should be framed within the human nature. No individual exists outside of a context. Arbitrators, professional, ethical formation, cultural, legal background, and even the fact that a party appointed you is part of the context. So I will say the answer is not amnesia. There is no context. You need to embrace that context, but you need to master the context. And actually, the parties, and we know that it's an acceptable practice within ethical guidelines, to interview prospective candidates, and when you go to the CRF guidelines and you see the matters that can be addressed during the interviews, you can ask about past experience. What is your attitude regarding the arbitration procedure? What is your experience? So people will appoint you precisely because of your context. So, and you are human, so you cannot disregard the context. And I think there's a Mexican joke, and I was telling Diana that, you know, when you speak in another language, then the jokes doesn't look that nice. But in Mexico, they say, a good lawyer doesn't know the law, but knows the judge. It's not that I want that judge because he's gonna favor my client. It's I want that judge because I know how they think. And this is very important. So I think there's a natural, let's say, tension when you have been appointed. But once the appointment is confirmed, that tension should be transformed. So you don't have a duty to the party that appointed you. You are not an advocate for that party. Now you are a member of the arbitral tribunal. The duty is towards the arbitration procedure, towards your duty of solving the dispute, and you have to do it based on your principles. Now you are a member of the decision-making body. You need to be part of the consensus, obviously without compromising your principles, and you need to be clear that you have to safeguard the duty of process. But in this regard, I think you can do it. But that implies a self-awareness that you have to be, you need to know yourself. You need to question yourself and see that it's not only the factors inside the arbitral tribunal and the fact that the party appointed you, but you need to know what is shaping your understanding of the dispute, understanding the parties, and then you, from that point forward, you can detach. It's not easy, obviously, and many people have different opinions, but I think it's something that can be achievable, not in an absolute way, but it's something that can be and must be done because the system allows that to do it. But you need to be part of that task, not easy task.
Okay, I like the word self-awareness. And I think that everything begins with that concept. Catherine, how do arbitrators reconcile the duty of independence with implicit gratitude or loyalty that may arise? Is there a gratitude, loyalty feeling?
So I will try to tap into some of the themes I think we've been talking about, in particular, magic realism. So I think there are a couple of ways we try to think about impartiality as a magical thing, right? This idea that you could appoint someone and go through the process of appointing them, and then magically, that process is like it goes into a zone where they don't remember it. It's irrelevant to their decision. Of course, that can't be separated. I think it's part of it. It has to be taken account of. So instead of thinking of it as a magical word, impartiality, let's look at the more realistic side. As Andrea said, all humans are subject to biases. We call them cognitive biases. And part of the problem we have here, we were talking about storytelling, is we're not very good at telling the story of impartiality. We have a very flat vocabulary. Something is either partial or biased or impartial and unbiased, when in fact it's a much more nuanced concept. It's a much more nuanced request that we're making of the arbitrator, if we're going to be realistic about it. And that means, I think, that we do need to reconceive what we are asking the party-appointed arbitrator to do. So when we talk about also magical thinking, I think also the IBA guidelines, when they say, all three are identical, that's magical, that's not realistic. Because in fact, we have different ethical rules that are related to their impartiality that we attach to party-appointed arbitrators. So for example, it's ethically permissible for party-appointed arbitrators to be interviewed by and to speak with the parties when they're getting appointed. That is the reason why we limit what they can ask is to protect impartiality, but we permit it with party-appointed arbitrators, and we prohibit it for chairpersons. They can't be interviewed. Why? Because that would be a breach of impartiality. But we allow it for party-appointed arbitrators because that process is considered consistent with the function of a party-appointed arbitrator, who then as a consequence, must have a different type of impartiality obligation than the chairperson. Here's another example. The party-appointed arbitrators can speak with the party who appointed them regarding appointment of the chairperson. That's considered ethically acceptable. But you cannot have a conversation with the chairperson. Why? That's ethically unacceptable. Why? Because, again, it's another example where we have different rules about impartiality that apply to the party-appointed arbitrator than the chairperson. And why is that important? These both signal that we have a different role, a different functional role that we expect the party-appointed arbitrator to perform than the chairperson. And let me give you a couple of examples of how we know this is a different role. One, the chairperson has several functions they can do that we prohibit the party-appointed arbitrator from doing. A chairperson can sign procedural orders, which party-appointed arbitrators cannot do by themselves. A chairperson, for example, if the other arbitrators are unavailable, can also sign the award in certain instances on behalf of the tribunal. Chairpersons set the agenda. Chairpersons can set the financial arrangements. We wouldn't entrust these functions to party-appointed arbitrators because we have a different expectation about what impartiality means for those individuals. The problem is we don't have the vocabulary. What we have is partial, impartial, and we need a more nuanced vocabulary to be able to describe the kind of impartiality that we expect of party-appointed arbitrators, which I believe is different in both scope and nature than what we expect of chairpersons. And I think the problem is that we don't identify what that means. We don't draw appropriate lines to explain and shape that new concept of impartiality. And so what ends up happening is we argue over whether they can or can't be impartial, instead of what is it like? What is the nature of their impartiality? When do they cross the line over what's expected of them? And so I think what we need is, to be more realistic, less magical thinking when we talk about these very fine concepts of impartiality as applied to party-appointed arbitrators. Because the short answer to your question is no, they can't forget about how they were appointed. And we don't want, I would go one step further to say we don't want them to forget. That's why we have the process of party appointment.
Thank you. Before going to the second round, which is called Between Appearance and Perception, I would like to say that I like this term, nuanced concept. Instead of being a binary concept of partial, impartial, it's nuanced. And it's related to the expectations that the party have. How Ernesto, in arbitration, can reconcile this concept that is nuanced, not absolute. This concept of being impartial. I mean, is it enough to be impartial, or must one also be seen as impartial? I mean, the perception of neutrality could be or should be as important as neutrality itself? How do you see this?
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. Yes, I really think that it is not enough with being impartial, but you have to also be seen as impartial. But I think that the first question is talking about the co-arbitrator. No? How do we understand the impartiality of a party-appointed arbitrator? It is the same of the chairman as or not, no? As Catherine asked himself. I think that really is not that simple. It's not that way, and we cannot understand in the same way the impartiality of the chairperson and the party-appointed arbitrator. I know that formally, with some exception that Catherine explained, the system of the independence and neutrality of chairperson and party-appointed arbitrators is the same, with some exceptions, I insist. But this is, I think I pose a question, for example. I think that you cannot understand in the same way this system for the chairperson and the co-arbitrator. And I pose a question. We can find a conflict in the appointment of a co-arbitrator or a chairperson when this person has shared a law firm with the counsel that is appointing him during, I don't know, 8 years. If it were 2 years, maybe the answer is clear, considering the IBA rules, for example. But what about if they shared law firm, I don't know, 8 years ago? No? If I'm affected by this conflict, I will not consider that it's the same if I'm appointing a party-appointed arbitrator or a chairperson. No? I think it's clearly not the same. So I think that the concept of impartiality, it's different in both cases, and we have to treat it as different, and not, for example, all the centers do it in cases like this, and I think this is not good. This is not good because we, in certain way, delegitimate the figure of the co-arbitrator. No? We can do it. And once said this, I think that, yes, it is very important, not only to be impartial, of course, but also to look impartial. Why? Because, we do not expect from the co-arbitrator we appointed to be blind, no, to follow up blindly our thesis, but what do we ask him? We ask him to, of course, have a deep knowledge of the case, have a deep technical knowledge, and do a function of persuading the rest of the members of the tribunal to have credibility, to make a certain control and counterbalance. But you cannot do this in any way if you are look as partial, no? Or a partisan co-arbitrator. So probably your most important faction is absolutely out if you are perceived as a partisan. So yes, I think it is very important.
Thank you, Ernesto. And Diana, talking again about expectations, do parties expect that their appointed arbitrators understand them, and how does that expectation shape behavior?
Thanks, Ceci. It's a double question.
Yes.
And I think that I'm more qualified to answer the second one, but still I'm going to try to figure out a single answer to both of them. By first highlighting some conceptual points, because you know I am a professor and I need to make some concepts first. Secondly, by providing a more practical approach, because I'm also a practitioner, so I need to put a feet on en la tierra. And third, because by focusing on some retrospective and prospective remarks. So first, concepts. Please come with me and picture a pendulum, you know, the pendulum. And don't be afraid, I'm not going to hypnotize you. I don't have that such magical powers. So it's just to imagine the scene. And on one extreme of the pendulum, I want you to imagine that appointing party has no expectations beyond basic competence. On the other extreme, please think of a party who has lots of expectations on each arbitrator. Most real-world expectations swing into the middle, okay? They're more like reasonable expectations. Usually, we can explain them in two parts or in two baskets: the subjective expectations on one hand and the objective expectations on the other hand. Subjective expectations live inside the appointed party's head, psychological, personal, often invisible to others, and even to the arbitrator itself. Think of a party hoping its appointed arbitrator will decide favorably its case for simply affinity or gratitude. Objective expectations, by contrast, are external and legible. For example, that the arbitrator reads the entire file, devotes enough time to the case, follows the rules, discloses conflicts, and behaves with integrity throughout the process. The arbitrator can know about these expectations without the party telling him or telling her about them. Second, practice. Everyone in this room, and you know it better than me because perhaps you're lawyers, which I'm not anymore, knows that the selection of the arbitrators is one of the most important strategic moments of the whole arbitration. So far, human beings appoint human beings. So both subjective and objective expectations travel with this choice. In this context, where to place those understanding expectations? I believe neither at pure subjectivism nor at pure objectivism. It may sit in the middle, a reasonable desire that that appointed arbitrator has the knowledge, factual, legal, and technical, to grasp the case fully and articulate it in the deliberations. But here's the rub. Any magic comes with a price. There is a problem with that, because understanding can be read in two different ways. One reading is epistemic. The appointed arbitrator understands that the theory, the evidence, the risk, and can explain it clearly in deliberations and pressure test it against the record. The other reading is advocative, because the appointed arbitrator is expected to push the theory forward, even regardless ethical lines, to hold the line of the appointed party, instructed or not, and even to dissent if necessary. To some, the first is compatible with the neutrality and the second collides with it. To others, both of them are inaccurate. At some point, all these may raise, not necessarily, concerns of neutrality, impartiality, and independence. Why? Catherine said it, and Andrea and Ernesto, because our modern soft law architecture expects the same standards, at least in principle, because Catherine gave us some examples to differentiate, to distinguish the president of the tribunal from the co-arbitrators. But the principles of the modern soft law architecture expect the same standards for presidents or chairmen to the other co-arbitrators. It doesn't distinguish. You can find the IBA rules. You can find also the Uncitral Code of Arbitrators for investment cases. And there is a paradox here, because we find a reality and that sometimes collides with the soft law. So it's a paradox. And where I want to put here in retrospective is that it hasn't been that way in history. In history, from a point of view, from the international public law, for example, you find the Permanent Court of International Justice and the Iranian American Tribunal, just to quote two examples, where adjudicators were considered as not really being neutral, and they could support a party's position. Even in the commercial arbitration point of view, the AAA, also in its original 1977 Code of Ethics, permitted to include these arbitrators who were not presumed to be neutral. But then the system changed, and we have these principles of being independent, impartial, for all kinds of arbitrators. So finally, from a perspective, so what is going to happen for us in the future, I would like to finish where I began, with the pendulum. And I think that parties often, not always, but often hope for an arbitrator who at least understands them. Our task as arbitrators is to channel that hope toward epistemic competence, not to assume a litigating role, to welcome understanding as a tool of fairness, not a vow of loyalty. When parties want something else, When they truly want differentiate roles that belong to their own expectations, they can set it so explicitly in their arbitration clauses or in other rules. Otherwise, the default in modern arbitration is simple to state and demanding to leave. Not as harmonic as one, the YouTube song, you know, the one love, one life. It's not exactly the same, but in arbitration, we would say one tribunal, one standard, 3 independent minds.
Thank you, Diana. We need to move on to the next round, which we have called the slow erosion of impartiality. And after listening to Vargas Llosa again, you will understand why. Vamos a escuchar de nuevo, por favor, a Vargas Llosa desde la mesa de control, por favor.
Bueno, yo no creo que los países se jodan en un momento, salvo casos muy excepcionales. Yo creo que la decadencia, el fracaso, los retrocesos de un país son un proceso, algo que va ocurriendo a lo largo del tiempo y cuya responsabilidad recae sobre muchas personas y muchas generaciones.
What Vargas Llosa just said is that countries don't decay in a single moment, right? But through generations. That idea resonates in arbitration, in the topic we're addressing this morning, because neutrality doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes slowly through repeated appointments, implied expectations, and above all, with the normalization of compromise. So now I ask Ernesto if, as Vargas Llosa said, countries don't decay overnight, but over generations, could we say the same thing about institutions, including arbitration, of course?
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. Probably yes, because institution means a tradition or a history, something that is built along years, decades, or even centuries. So it probably doesn't fall in one day, probably. No? We have this problem with or we are in a process like this with arbitration. I don't think so, and I hope so, no, overall. But can we think, can be this the case of in concrete, the party-appointed arbitrator? No, I think that maybe this is the question, and maybe this is not so clear. No? We heard yesterday some colleagues talking about the works on the third work group in ancestral, no? About the creation of a permanent court, for example, that probably means or could imply the disappearing the institution of the party-appointed arbitrator. No? And maybe this could be the case. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think that really is an institution, the party-appointed arbitration, that we have to take care of, and it is very important. And it is very important because his potential disappear could really affect to the arbitration institution in itself, because parties really don't want to renounce to appoint his arbitrator. No? They don't really want to renounce to this. So why we are, or someone is proposing, eliminate the party-appointed arbitrator. We heard yesterday some problems about double hatching. No? I agree that in certain cases this could be a problem, or not necessarily, but this could be a problem. But I think that the real problem is that we are treating to make the party-appointed arbitrator something that it is not. No? So it is not really, and we have to understand very good what is in reality the party-appointed arbitrator. Maybe we should create a specific status for the party-appointed arbitrator, because if we do not, and we expect from the party-appointed arbitrator something that he's not, that lead us to frustration, and I insist to delegitimate the figure. No, so I think we should do this.
Andrea, about the same thing, do you think that, same question, impartiality erodes little by little through routine, repetition, through almost invisible habits, rather than through a clear ethical breach?
I think this is a hard one, so I will answer like a lawyer. It depends. I don't think in every case happens the same. But I think that impartiality rarely erodes or collapses in a drastic moment, in a very clear ethical violation, but it fades away slowly, quietly, by repetition of apparently harmless habits, by repeating certain thoughts that may seem neutral but somehow diminish genuine impartiality, by repeating, getting too familiar with certain situations. And I will say that maybe this is part of life. I am not that old, don't get scared. But when you lose one drive, you know, or the appetite, because when you are young in your first appointment, you are eager to eat the world, and you want to prove that you do a great job, that you are alert, you check everything, you pay attention. And when you get experience, obviously experience is something that is valuable, but it's a responsibility. And when you get too familiar with something, you say, I have seen this, I know how it goes. And I agree with Vargas Llosa, it's a process. You allow that to happen. Impartiality is not a static quality. And I remember we once had a conversation and we were talking about sport, scuba diving, surf, and we were talking about the mind. It is a muscle. You need discipline. You need to exercise yourselves. So the antidote here, and I will refer to the previous panel, Francois stated, you need to, in order to allow the system to change you, you need to self-awareness, self-reflection, constantly question yourself. Am I doing this right? Can I do something better this time? And I think it's something that needs to be done, because if not, you allow it to erode.
I couldn't agree more with what you just said. We are going to move on to the final round, which is called fiction or reality. And Diana is going to answer this question. Can transparency mechanisms or disclosure rule truly mitigate psychological bias? Is there such a thing as ethical fatigue? A short one, please.
Thank you. I'm going to stay short with the first question, and I'm going to answer only that question because the other one belongs more to the coffee break. To make it very quickly, the answer to me is no. I mean, those transparency or disclosure mechanisms don't work for this psychological bias. And I would like to invite you to think of some thoughts. For example, I must do it well. I will try to protect the position of the party who appointed me as a way to say thanks. Or even worse, sometimes, I will protect the position of the party who appointed me so she or he will appoint me again in the future. I mean, I would like an appointed party to appoint me again because my award was great, not because I decided in favor of that person. But anyway, my point is that each thought represents a small psychological distortion, usually unspoken, sometimes unnoticed, but sometimes capable of impacting on the arbitrator's judgment. So for those reasons, I don't believe that current transparency mechanisms and in arbitrations such as disclosure requirements or declaration of independence are designed to truly address this kind of psychological bias. On the opposite, I mean, it's the contrary. They focus on objective factors, not the psychological ones. Look at the IBA guidelines or the UNCITRAL Code of Ethics. All of them, they are trying to make an objective criteria on when an arbitrator has to make a disclosure, not how this arbitrator thinks or believes. It's kind of the system measures what can be seen, not what can be felt. And psychological bias is all about a perception, a feeling, and not what can be objectively be seen. But I would like to say, Ceci, just one thing, is that instead of looking for these transparency mechanisms, we should look more for diversity and deliberation. Because the more diverse the tribunal is, the more likely is that one person's bias will be balanced by another's perspective. And these have been proven by empirical evidence. There is a study made in the University of London that I will be happy to share with you over the coffee break.
Thank you, Diana. We are running out of time, so finally we ask Catherine the following. We often discuss impartiality as an individual virtue, but what if the real challenge lies in the system itself? If arbitrators depend on repeated appointments, reputation, and professional networks to sustain their practice, how can the structure of the system, of the market, can evolve to better protect the independence of arbitrators?
So first I have to object to the, ethical fatigue. We can't have ethical fatigue. I have a book coming out on this topic, so hold off on the ethical fatigue. But I do think you're right, that in a sense, personal ethics do have a limit in terms, and we have to control the market. Let me give a couple of optimistic closing examples from Peru, right? So first of all, the flourishing of arbitration in Peru is a reaction to lack of impartiality and, I am told, corruption within the judiciary. And so you've created, in a sense, an entirely separate market called arbitration in an effort to counteract existing lack of impartiality in the judiciary. Additionally, there's a really interesting reform that I think is pretty unique to Peru in domestic arbitration, as I understand also authored by maybe your husband, so I don't know if you are impartial on this issue, but opening up appointment to foreign arbitrators in domestic arbitrations. It sounds like a really simple rule, but what it does is it totally changes the market in a couple of ways. One, it expands it dramatically. There are a lot more arbitrators you can appoint, number one. Number two, it's much harder to corrupt an arbitrator from Uruguay than from Peru if you're a Peruvian party. Number three, it also, I think, creates a lot more diversity, intellectual diversity on the panel, which produces a better outcome, a more objective, a more impartial outcome in the arbitration. So such a simple rule actually really transformed the marketplace. The other thing that I think is also, again, unique to Peru is that you have this rule that all municipal contracts go to arbitration, which again creates this separate system from the judiciary. In reaction to that, as I recall, and again, I am restating what I've been told, so apologies for errors, but the Lima Arbitration Center, the Lima LCC, created El Faro, right?
Yes,
which is a truly innovative, necessary because you have all these state-involved arbitrations, but a level of transparency that exists here in Lima that is truly unique. And that can provide an external check on the behavior of arbitrators and whether they behave impartially, whether they have channeled it internally or not. And sometimes that can be enough. So I'll end on that optimistic note that for all the critiques of Peru and the challenges that you have here, there are some really incredible, I would say, innovative and to be replicated by other countries, ways of regulating the market for arbitrators. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. And final question for every one of you. Vargas Llosa once said that if he had to save one of the books he wrote from a fire, would be Conversación en la Catedral. If you had to save one book from your library, whichever author, what it would be, Catherine?
I'm going to ask to start someone else. I don't know. I'm not sure. I would think I would cry rather than grab for a book. Sorry.
Ernesto?
Me, Well, coming from Spain, I should save the Quijote, of course.
Quijote, yes. Andrea,
Conde de Montecristo de
El
Alejandro
Conde de
Dumas.
Montecristo, nice.
Well, mine is, it hasn't any word. It has images. It's my family album.
Ah, wow, that's a good one. Well, thank you very much for listening to all of us. Thank you. Thank you to the panel.